Welcome to
the Reddit
Roundup.
Daughters of Reddit, what is something you wish your father knew about girls when you were growing up? Now that I'm an adult, I realize just how wonderful my father really is. Not just in comparison to others, but he is an objectively amazing father. He taught us children the hard life lessons while still protecting us. He taught us to be self-sufficient and independent. He taught us to work hard and don't give up just because things get challenging. He busted his ass to make sure we got to go on vacation and experience life. He taught me to hunt, fish, and fix a car. He also taught me to garden and grow my own vegetables. How to take care of livestock and other animals with compassion. However, he also treated me more like a son than a daughter. I only wish that my father would have acknowledged that I'm a girl and it's okay for me to like dressing up and that it's okay to throw like a girl. Granted, I got a full ride to college for sports, and that's partly because I had to hang with the boys and my dad didn't want me to be a great female player but just a great player in general. I think he messed me up only in the sense that it's extremely difficult for me to date. I'm either too intimidating to strangers or one of the boys to people I know. I think I lost my feminine side because I am so close to my dad and he was slightly dismissive of my emotional side. I had to be tough and stoic. I suppose I shouldn't complain. I just feel like if my dad were less of a hard ass and treated me more like a daughter than a son, I would fit in more. Maybe be able to get a date instead of always just being a bro. That being said, I am thankful for the life skills he provided and the protective eye he still has watching over his baby girl. 26 Yo F. Edit, news update. Got a lot of confidence from all the positivity, and now I've got a date coming up with a guy who doesn't know me or my brothers, and I get to make an actual first impression without being seen as one of the boys beforehand. Wish me luck. He seems kind and intelligent. I'm really excited to see what happens. Even if it's a flop, it's a good step out of my passive ways. My dad actually was an amazing man and I think very special as a dad. He really encouraged our independence and our want to learn about anything and everything, which I think a lot of dads forget to do. He focused a lot on education, and as a result my brothers and I were reading very, very early, which helped us be interested in things like the Science Museum and the zoo and any sort of science program on TV. He used to just let us run crazy as kids because he knew how important it was for us to savor actually being kids. When I was little, I made a mud pit in the backyard. We had a hole that our Weimaraner dug and it got filled with water, so 3-year-old me thought it would make the perfect mud pit. After about half an hour of playing by myself, my dad came outside and saw me, naked, covered in mud, in the pit. Where other parents probably would have been pissed, he laughed and grabbed the camera. As we got older, he encouraged our independence and hobbies. For my brothers it was gaming, and I made a lifelong career from their interest in gaming. For me it was theatre, then science, and eventually wildlife. My dad wanted to be a biologist but never had the drive or money to finish college, so I used to teach him all about genetics and about how the phylogenetic trees of various organisms had changed. He knew a lot, but wanted to know all about how science had changed and what the new concepts were. He outfitted me with field gear, and when we would go camping or hiking together, we'd rock flip and look for herpetofauna. He helped me with a plant project a few years ago, and that was probably the most fun we had. He just never discouraged our interests and passions, which is so important. This doesn't really have a point anymore. I think I just needed to write this out. My dad died 3 weeks ago very unexpectedly, and no man on earth could rival how amazing he was. He truly is responsible for our independence and wonder of the world, and I think more dads need to be like him. Dads, let your daughters and sons learn freedom. Let them explore the world and make an effort to be interested in their interests, no matter how weird or dumb you think they might be. Let your kids be kids and do dumb things sometimes. Also, always let your daughter know that you have her back. Whatever stew-led decision she makes, trouble she runs into, dumb man she dates or gets involved with, you've got her and you'll be there for her when things fall apart. My dad was so good about that. That it's great you're extending the offer to spend time together, but when you invite your kid to the garage to help with something, actually have them help with something. For context, my dad would be working on his boat engine or something, and he'd say, "Come help me with this," and then I'd sit on a bucket for 20 minutes watching him in silence, and finally wander off out of boredom. Looking back, It's great he wanted to spend time with me and I appreciate that, but being present and being involved are two different things. Treating every boy interested in your daughter as your enemy does both of you a disservice. My dad was very overprotective. Anytime a boy had a crush on me, he would be immediately added to my dad's shit list, even if he was perfectly kind and respectful. After a certain point, I just stopped listening to my dad's complaints. In my eyes, he had lost the right to give input about my relationships. Unfortunately, when I was 17 I became entangled in an abusive relationship. My dad hated the guy. But since he also hated every one of my previous suitors, I didn't interpret his concerns as legitimate. On top of that, since he was so busy trying to prevent me from having relationships, he never talked to me about what a healthy relationship looks like. Unwanted sexual attention from grown men doesn't always come from strangers. It comes from family friends too. Pay attention to your friends' behaviors and comments around your kids. My dad cut off a longtime friend after catching him leering at me in a bathing suit at a pool party when I was only 12. Make sure she is not afraid to bring home the person she is dating. Encourage open communication about relationships, dating, respect, etc. If your daughter is afraid you're going to be waiting on the porch with a shotgun or you're going to read the riot act to whomever they bring home, they are more likely to sneak around behind your back. Edit. It's not the threat of physical harm that is the issue. Most people would likely agree they've heard a version of this and laughed it off as a joke. It's the sense of doubt that it creates in young women. The feeling that they are not capable of making good decisions on their own when it comes to the relationships they choose to pursue. We keep preaching that we want our daughters to feel empowered to make their own choices. It starts by removing the need for them to choose partners that meet your approval. Instead, empower them by teaching them how to navigate relationships, have the tough and uncomfortable conversations, let them make a few bad decisions so they can appreciate and identify what healthy male interaction looks like. My dad is a great guy. He just said the things that dads were supposed to say 20+ years ago. It always made me uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to express myself. That's what is so great about this thread. When you know better, you do better. How to put hair in ponytails / brush long hair in general. Just thinking about it 20 years later makes my scalp hurt. Also, to include the daughter in stereotypically male housework. I can cook and load a dishwasher like my life depends on it, but I can't do any sort of maintenance like putting up a picture frame or unclogging a sink. My dad actually did a pretty good job of raising me as a single dad, as I'm pretty sure my stepmother contributed nothing to my upbringing. The only thing I guess he could have done better was been more knowledgeable about what he called female issues. He didn't really understand periods and cramps and all that associated nonsense because when he was growing up, he was never taught about them and men didn't need to learn. It was just icky to him. When you do something wrong, apologize. Don't just try to ignore what we just fought about and try to be our friend 15 minutes later. When you try to ignore our problem, it hurts us. It makes us angry. We won't want to be friends. My friends and I have almost all had this issue with our dads. The worst thing, though, is when you try to have someone else apologize, fix things for you. My dad has asked me to be this middleman for my younger sister, my friend has been asked by her dad, and some others have mentioned their dad sending in their mom. It doesn't make things better, and a lot of the time, makes that middleman lose respect for you. Respect us as people and apologize to us. How to build and support a healthy self-esteem and lifestyle habits. The things you say and the way you treat her can leave a lasting impression on your daughter. I was a latchkey kid in an Asian household filled with cheap convenience foods, 3 for $1 hot dog bows, Chinese crackers, etc., and lack of income for things to do outside of watching TV at home. So, I grew up overweight and uninformed about healthy lifestyle habits. Since tweenhood, my dad was constantly on me about my body and bluntly laid it out that I would never find a boyfriend. If he saw me in a t-shirt or shorts, he'd comment on how big my arms/thighs looked. I'm now in my late 20s and still refuse to wear tanks/short sleeves/skirts/dresses/shorts because of that idea that has been ingrained in my thought process. The link between being fat and being single still has a huge presence in my mind. My dad passed away last year from his own struggles with his health, cancer, diabetes, hypertension. Since then, I've made my own lifestyle changes and went to therapy. I am about halfway to my weight end goal and I've discovered a love for hiking, spin classes, and yoga. But trying to build up self-esteem through reframing of things and positive self-talk has been the hardest struggle of all. Don't just assume your daughter won't be interested in your activities because they aren't stereotypically girly or because once as a small child, she didn't want to do it. Not wanting, say, go hiking or fishing when I was 5 years old doesn't mean I never ever want to do it. Keep trying to get your kids involved in your life and don't just give up. You're teaching them not to share things about themselves and losing the chance to bond over something you love. When your daughter is going through puberty and starts getting her period, don't write off the things she's going through. There's all sorts of new hormones swirling around in there, and they're gonna affect her mood. She's getting periods, they're probably gonna hurt. Being in pain makes you grumpy, but don't write off every instance of anger or bad temper as being because you're on your period. Maybe her mom doesn't get bad ones. Maybe you've never thought about it because your wife is a grown woman who has learned to deal with her periods and the assorted mood swings and pains and moved on. Your daughter hasn't yet. Be a little more thoughtful, help teach her ways to manage what she's feeling. If she's in a lot of pain, and it doesn't change after a while, take her to a doctor. Maybe nothing's wrong and she got shit luck, but she could have endometriosis or cystic ovaries. Stick up for her at the doctor. Lots of women have trouble finding doctors who will listen to them about their pain, and it's very hard to advocate for yourself when you're only 14 and throwing up from pain. Don't be scared of having your picture taken. If your daughter wants to take pictures of you, or especially with you, let them. My dad died when I was 13 years old and then I realized that all of his hiding from the camera meant I was left with only a handful of photos and he wasn't in any of our home videos. You don't realize how important they can be until you aren't able to make new ones. That it is best to have a personal bond with your father, a hobby or activity that's the two of you no matter how small, and not him just be there when the whole family is together. When our outdoor cats would get ticks I quickly alerted my father and we removed them. For him a chore and for me the one thing that was us doing something together. +1 on this one. GF and I have been together 4 years, and we have a 10-year-old from before we met. She's glued to her mom's hip since they came here from El Salvador with nothing but each other. Last year they had a big spring festival at school, and her mom had to work. Tenyo was super bummed, so I offered to take her instead. We spent the night playing little carnival games, doing puzzles, playing sports, etc. and had an absolute blast. It was the first time we ever did something just me and her without her mom. That day completely changed our relationship. She started telling everyone I was her dad, started asking to do things just the two of us, and overall became a lot more affectionate with me. We regularly go and do our own thing like bike rides, fishing, frisbee, and basketball now. Her mom and I just had twin girls, so she's feeling a bit like a spare tire these days. I should make more of an effort to do some stuff just me and her since it's been 100% focus on the babies for months now. Glad I clicked this thread. I'll get something planned just for us this weekend. Reminds me of how my dad used to go out and chain smoke in our backyard patio when I was a kid. He'd sit in this chair that was right by the dry vent. I used to put pennies under the vent and use that as an excuse to sit near him. He'd say I was checking how much more lint/dirt/whatever was collecting on a certain penny. I remember having these long, weird conversations. Hey, Dad, look, remember how this penny had only a little lint yesterday and now look? And he'd always humor me in these conversations, even though looking back he probably really wanted to be left alone while he drank/smoked. He never let that on though. It seems so silly to look back on, but it meant, and still means, so much to me. I should probably tell him that. My parents always had foster children and 3 of their own. Then they adopted one. I don't think I ever really had my parents to myself for any length of time. And I honestly don't think my parents ever gave a second thought about it. They were doing God's work. That's all that really mattered. Now I'm 34. My dad was giving me shit recently for not knowing how to do things. Like, how to change my oil, or how to fix something. He knew how to do everything but he didn't share that information with me. When I finally piped up and said how could I have ever spent quality time learning something from you when there were 6 other kids competing for your one-on-one attention. He said I never really thought about it like that. Do you feel like you were slighted by how we raised you? And the answer is yes, I do. It might be selfish, but I feel like I missed out on having a quality relationship with my parents. We lived in constant chaos from behavior problems. Sometimes I feared for my life. Sometimes they taught me intimate details about sex. I wish I had spent more time with my parents. To this day, they still spend all of their time raising someone else's kids. I wouldn't change a thing about it though, because those kids needed my parents more than I did. Hopefully someday soon, they'll retire, and when I call they can finally ask about my life instead of telling me about the constant chaos. I remember a few times in my adult life, my dad and I would work on projects. He'd think they were dumb. Hey dad, I want to restore this rusty old fish tank stand into a coffee bar. But he would always help me with the projects, and I think he finally got enough time with me to see me as a person instead of just one more of his kids. Those little things matter, even if your child never speaks up and tells you. There's nothing more valuable than time and love. There are some men, and boys, who are perfectly decent when other men are around, but are not nice to women, and girls, when there are no other men around. Believe your daughter about her own lived experiences, even if you didn't witness them yourself. And believe other women about their own lived experiences as well. If your daughter grows up hearing you talking about how your mother and sister were clearly overreacting when they said your childhood neighbor was creepy, because, after all, he was always perfectly decent to you, your daughter is not going to go to you when your own neighbor is creepy to her when you're not around. Our standards of how we expect to be treated by men come from how you treat our mothers. Show her kindness, we will expect kindness. Treat her like shit and we assume being treated like shit is normal. Edit, my fist Reddit gold, 3 thanks stranger. And to everyone else, I'm glad to hear this may have given some of you insight into why you or a loved one are the way you are. This applies to all genders and family dynamics. I'm not sure about girls in general. To me, I'd rather have had a dad who was there, than a dad who was successful and a workaholic. When your dad is gone, you remember the silly little things, the bedtime stories he told you, playing with you on the beach, having ice cream together. Be a father who is present in your daughter's life. Play with her when she's small. Tell her stories. When she's older, listen to her. Take an interest in her interests even if they sound silly. Take an interest in her life in general. That's all anyone can ask. I wholeheartedly agree with this. My dad told me later in my life that he was really nervous to be a dad to a girl, but he was an amazing dad when I was growing up, he still is. I was not an only child, but he always made time for just the two of us. My favorite memories are of us just going to get an ice cream cone at Dairy Queen after dinner on a random summer night. He also used to show up to everything I did in terms of sports games, even though I was terrible, or school plays, etc., even though he worked upwards of 50 hours a week. When I got into the awkward middle school/high school days, and they were pretty bad for me because I was bullied and had depression, he would always ask me about my day, every day. Even though I mostly went to my mom with all my issues, knowing my dad cared meant a lot. I didn't realize it at the time, but I am so lucky to have my dad. Even to this day, I'm in my late 20s, married, and live on the other side of the country. I know that he's always there. That's it for this time. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.